Hey guys, welcome to another video. So today I really wanted to talk about the new Liberos which have come into the game. You know, since the game's started, we more or less have only had two options. It was Noya and Komori. These are the two UR and SP kind of Liberos which came out early game since the SPs have launched. But since then we've not really had any options until recently. Now we have four Liberos, right? And with that has come a lot of different options, and they also provide different things. So I really wanted to talk about which ones are best for the game and who would maybe work best for your team, right? Because now you have an option to pick who you get instead of just picking one and duping them up as much as possible. With that being said though, let's start breaking things down. I think it's really important to start with to talk about what the similarities are, right? So for all of them, they all have a setting skill. They all have their skill 2 as a set of some sort, and equally their ultimate is also, funnily enough, a receive skill. So all of them for that in that regard are very similar. But after that, they do have a lot of differences, and I kind of wanted to break down the differences kind of one by one first and compare them all, right? So let's start with Komori as the UR. It should be noted that UR Komori, despite being a UR character, is of SP rarity. It's the same with Sakuza. Both of them on JP came out between the Blazing Breach trio and the Fireworks Festival trio. So like between Ione and Suki in the SP banners. So as a result, these guys are SP grade, which is why I can like include both of them in any review which I do. That being said though, so Komori's main kind of things are that he provides a little bit of defense technique for the team. He provides attack technique after he ults to the spiker. He also provides strength based on the backline, the receiver's reflex, but that's at SR4. And then finally, he provides a little bit of awareness when setting, and then a little bit of quick attack / power attack power. Generally speaking, I would say that Komori is probably the most all-rounded Libero of all of them. He provides plenty of reflex for himself through the connect stacks, right? Receive the next stack, sorry. And he also provides a lot of offensive stats as well. But then equally, when you've got the likes of his SR4, you get loads of reflex for your team. He provides awareness as well. He provides a little bit of everything. The one thing I would say though is that because of that, he kind of doesn't do too much in total. I feel like he's a jack of all trades, but a master of none to an extent. And that will become more apparent once I've looked at everyone else's kits. Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to talk about as a TLDR for him is that I feel like his memory as well works really good with receives. So another thing I wanted to talk about was his memory. His memory works really good for people with receive skills. Those people get a little bit of stamina regen and a bit of a receive buff. So these are all really helpful things, right? But I think his TLDR, if I had to summarize it into one sentence, he boosts a bit of everything, but it's best for characters who like to receive and then get like the strength and stamina buffs from that, right? And a bit of defense tech as well. So the obvious one would be Sakuza, right? Sakuza likes to be in the back line. He likes to receive and then he likes to attack based on his memory, right? It's those kind of characters which you want. You want the receiving characters which like to hit from backline. So personally, Shinoya, to me, if I had to summarize in one sentence, it's extremely independent and works best in teams which don't like to receive. So his whole thing is that he can provide SR1 50%, SR2 65% reflex to himself. He also produces over potentially up to 120 spirit, right? And because of his skill 3 and if he gets duped skill 4 skill resonance 2, he can reduce the cooldown of his ultimate to essentially 2 net crossings, right? So resonance 2 puts it to 5 net crossings max. Then if the enemy crits or if you crit, etc., it reduces it down, and he's essentially got a 2 net crossing cooldown at SR2. So you can spam his ultimate. With this, obviously, lots of reflex, lots of spirit. He's very independent, but it means that none of these buffs go to another player. The only thing which he has, which he can give to another player, is his set. And even his set skill only provides awareness for himself based on his reflex. So ultimately, he is a very selfish. He's a very selfish Libero, but if you have him in your team and you just want like someone who's going to take up all the receives and you want to avoid, if you just want someone who's going to take up all the receives and avoid kind of buffing up the team because they don't really want to be taking any receives, this is your guy, right? My TLDR for him was a receiver who you want to play when you don't really have any other receivers, and he's got an entirely selfish kit which allows him to spam his ult and also reduce cooldowns, and he's mostly self-sufficient. Because that was the other thing as well, worth mentioning, completely forgot, really worth mentioning, is that Noya at SR4 reduces the cooldown of the next spike skill by 2 net crossings. So if you have a spiker who has an 8 net crossing cooldown and Noya uses his ult and it's not a bad like receive, then basically the next spike, instead of being 8 net crossings, will only have a 6 net crossing cooldown. There's little things like that which will like really help tempo of the game, and I think that he's actually a very strong character in that regard, but he does require the dupes for it. Next, we've got Noya 2, Jazz Noya. So the thing is about Jazz Noya, and I think probably the most interesting thing as well, is that he doesn't need any reflex whatsoever. His reflex is entirely mute because if you have 40% attack technique or defense technique, sorry, or more, that reception will be critical. What's really interesting is that he produces strength and team morale for every 3 receives, and that stacks infinitely from what I understand. And every time an enemy touches a ball, they get essentially a 3% defense technique. Like Noya gets 3% defense technique against that person. So if you've got a spam team like Ushijima, you know, if Ushijima's taking all your hits, Jazz Noya is really good against him, because that means that you're going to get a lot of defense technique specifically on your spam hitter, which means Noya's going to do even better against the same likes of Ushijima, ironically, right? Other things which make him really interesting is that his receive skill will reset based on someone using a set cooldown. So in teams with lots of set skills, which is kind of what you would want to be running with the Jazz trio, you would actually see him being able to refresh his ultimate almost every play, right? Which is really important. Like with Noya though, his set skill does only provide a very selfish action, right? Like it doesn't actually improve anybody else's set stats, but for what it's worth, it will be treated as an ultimate. I still don't understand why they have like the sets being treated as an ultimate label for like Osamu and Jazz Noya. Like I'm still trying to figure out what skill resonance or whatever benefits from setter ultimates, but probably missing something either way. So yeah, he's got a very selfish set, but the rest of his kit works really well in building up the receive of the team, and the rest of the kit works really. He's got a very selfish kit, but the rest of his kit works really well on building up the strength for the team and also being a reliable receiver who will take most of the hits again. Kind of similar to Noya V1 in that regard. My TLDR for Noya V2 is that he's a receiver which wants to receive as much as humanly possible so he can produce as much strength and morale as he can, right? So like Noya 1, he's mostly independent because he only needs the defense technique, which you'll get from the solid stacks and then also from the... So like Noya 1, he's mostly independent because he can get the defense technique from the focus stacks and then also through, you know, the twins and whatnot, and then that will result in him being able to crit by himself. He produces some spirit for himself through his memory, but not loads, to be fair. But he also has a cooldown reduction element to his ultimate thanks to setter skills being used, right? So assuming the team is built right, you've got another very independent Libero here who actually also does a little bit of team buffing offensively with strength as well, which is interesting, right? Similar to first Noya, but different in other ways. Lastly, we've got Yaku, the most recent addition. He came out yesterday actually. So I think Yaku is probably the most unique in that his main gimmick is that, like in his SSR version, if a receiver's normal, it will now become perfect, and that applies to anybody on the court when Yaku is on the court. Yaku is in general very built around buffing up your other receivers, right? So a clear thing for him is that when a person uses a defense skill, a clear aspect of this for Yaku is that when a teammate uses a receive skill, that will actually reset the cooldown of his ultimate, right? And vice versa, right? So you want him to receive, then someone else to receive, then him to receive, and he also buffs up the other teammates' receives in the process and his receive in the process if different people receive the ball. He also gains stacks of reading, which basically, as long as you have a receive skill, can result in you building up those stacks really quickly. So a good example of this is if you have the final exam Kemma Liev duo, right? Then even Liev will have a receive skill, making him part of this kind of combination. So as long as Kemma, Yaku, Kita, because he has a receive skill and he's paired with him, as long as any of these guys receive perfectly, then or do a perfect touch of any kind, then you get a stack of reading. Each stack, doesn't increase that much. It's 1% each, but when consumed, increases stamina by 10%. By 10, and then also increases the next receive by 2,000 points. This just overall increases receive and stamina a lot, keeping the game alive. I think this really promotes the idea of receive and block teams being teams which have rallies which last longer, right? And I think that's where this kind of kit will be really useful. His resonances also reflect this, right? So once you get a certain amount of stacks of reading, it increases the defense and attack technique. This is the only offensive buff he basically produces. Unfortunately, Yaku's main downside is that he's extremely defensive and doesn't produce any offensive. He actually struggles to crit, so unless you have 5 stacks of reading, he has nothing in his kit which will help him crit. He doesn't provide much in the way of reflex or spirit. He provides 30% of spirit if his set is off cooldown. So if he's able to set still, then he is able to provide 30% spirit to a team, but that's it. He provides no reflex, and like I said, offensively he only provides attack and defense technique with his SR4. So in that regard, he's very limited, right? He doesn't provide the traditional stats, but as a result, he converts normals into perfects, and he also buffs up his other teammates massively, right? And maybe you'd want them to crit instead. Hi guys, Editor Kieran here. I was kind of an idiot. So when I was talking about Yaku and saying that he provides no reflex for himself, and he can only crit every other turn if everything goes perfectly, one thing I didn't account for, being the idiot I am, is that Kemma provides reflex. After school Kemma provides reflex. Hell, even basic Kemma provides reflex. Kemma V1, right? So if you, in the sense of Kemma V2, if you make a perfect or normal touch, and the next person which touches has a receive skill, once again not difficult with the after school bond, then it will basically increase everyone's reflex and awareness for that set by 10%. And little things like that will add up quickly, and if you've got a long rally, then you've all of a sudden got 60% awareness, reflex, on top of the reflex which you've already got probably in your potential, right? So he's going to be critting often, and you won't need the reflex in the same way that other characters might, because it's provided through Kemma, right? So he's not as self-sufficient in that regard, but in the right team he's still pretty good. Just thought I'd add that. That was me being a bit silly, because that was one of the main drawbacks for me for Yaku, but that's kind of literally solved with Kemma V2. Just Kemma V2 is broken, but I'm going on a tangent. Anyways, keep watching the video. I'll talk about the rest of the characters in a second. Alright, bye. So, I jump around a lot with Yaku, mainly because his kit kind of all crosses over with each other and synergizes a lot. But basically, I think the TLDR for Yaku is that he provides 0 crit. Even if you get him to SR2 and everything goes perfectly, he's critting every 5 perfect hits, which is essentially, on a good day, you're looking at 1 in 2. In a perfect scenario, you're looking at 1 in 2 critical receives. But he does produce a lot of stamina for the team and works with a lot of receive-based players, kind of like Komori, but he has a lot more defensive aspects to it, increasing their receive stats by like a massive ton, right? And also resetting his cooldown in the process. Where Komori, on the other hand, has a lot more offensive stats and also can't reset his cooldowns and is kind of entirely reliant on the rest of the team receiving a little bit more because of it. That being said, though, he can also produce a lot of spirit through his memory, which is worth mentioning. It's, once again, nothing crazy because you can't crit very often, but if you can get him to crit, you're going to get a big number out of that, which is always very satisfying, right? So, Yaku is best. I think Yaku is very strong, but I think he's definitely best for essentially a Liev team. I genuinely couldn't imagine what other team he would work with, like if it's not a receiving team. It would have to be a receive label team, otherwise I couldn't fathom it, really. So, that being said, that is all of the Liberos, right? I thought what I'd do is that I'd summarize them all really quickly for you and also go with what I would suggest for you guys. So I have a little graph which I will put up on the screen in a minute, but the TLDR for all of them would be Noya 1, a spam hitter who likes to absorb all of the receives, right? He wants to take all the receives and is very selfish in his kit. He's extremely good with high reflex, high spirit, and extremely self-sufficient because of that, and can reduce cooldowns of setter cooldowns, and he can reduce setter cooldowns as well as hitting cooldowns when using his set and receive respectively when duped. Komori, on the other hand, is a little bit more defensive, provides a lot more spirit and reflex for the team. He also provides stamina with his memory to his teammates with receive skills, and then that will put you also on provides one a little bit of the other offensive stats. If you do have a receive based team, unlike Yaku, we'll go to later, don't provide strength. He provides a bit of awareness and set. If you have and he does provide a little bit of defense technique as well. You want Noya is specifically streak, kind of like Noya V1, wanting to take most of the receives because defensive streak stacks as much as possible to get as much strength for his team as possible. On the other hand, he also has a cooldown reset on his ultimate based purely on the fact of how many setters you have. So that question to you is that it's also quick. You have at least 2 other people with so you need to work specifically on your team, which aren't Noya. If that being said, though, he is extremely self-sufficient, only needing 40% defense technique to crit, you're probably providing with a little bit of spirit for himself, right? Finally, fundamentally, Noya is the least plug-and-play. Like you can put him into any team, and he provides little offensive stats, but in return converts any normal specific results on your back. Then I would say massively buffs up your receivers. Works best with when the quick attack he's just received, and vice versa. Who would have guessed? Someone else receiving video on that resets his cooldowns as well. For that. Yaku, I think, provides a lot of spirit for receives well. So if you can get him around, that's when he does really well. Camera team. So that being said, with the extra reflex which camera provides, that compensates for Yaku's lack of reflex. Fundamentally, and then you've also just got converting. Do you have a receive based perfect, which increases the likelihood of another perfect touch from camera? You know what I mean? It just all kind of flows and continues like that, right? And then lastly, Komori, I think, is another good all-rounder pick that kind of specializes in more offensive stats and then also just kind of helping your team with building out some of those really basic stats like your defense technique, your spirit, your reflex, etc. To an extent, the strength as well. You know, that's where he thrives. He provides a bit of a defensive option and helps your defensive players, but it might be like you have defensive players which are mostly power attackers, so you know, in my thought, I would be thinking Sakuza, I'd be thinking Bokuto, right? These are characters who you'd be building offensively, but these are characters which you'd be building offensively, but at the same time, you would be having... These are characters which you'd be building offensively, but equally would be kind of benefiting, would need the reflex to kind of buff up and make sure that they're critting because, say, their setter doesn't provide any reflex, so they need a little bit of help from like the likes of Komori, right? Equally, they'd really benefit from the strength because they'll be attacking often. You know, if you put Kita in with Komori, yeah, okay, he would get the stamina regen, but he would never hit, so he would never benefit from the strength buff. He would never hit, so he would never benefit from the awareness buff. Hell, he doesn't even crit, so he doesn't even benefit from the reflex buff, right? So it's like, I think Komori shines with offensive teams which need the defensive stats, right? But yeah, that's my Libero guide for you guys. Let me know what you think. I do really think that it's important that we start to look at what Liberos we're getting and why. I would argue that the best overall, if you just want to plug and play, is probably the first Noya, just because he can go into any team really easily. But if you're looking for an offensive team, Komori all the way, especially being a UR, he's a lot easier to dupe. Especially being a UR, he's a lot easier to dupe. On the other hand, Jazz is clearly spoke to Jazz, right? And Yaku is, I think, once again, if you're looking to build a receive core with Kama and Liev, I think Yaku's a perfect pickup for that team, right? So these middle two are a bit more bespoke, and meanwhile, like Noya and Komori, like the original two Libros, which we were kind of stuck with, are a little bit more catch-all, right? I still think Komori's better for your offensive teams, and then Noya for your less receive-based teams, you know, like your block teams, etc. But either way, there's the video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you are curious about, you know, what receive team I'm talking about with Yaku and what I'm alluding to, that's going to be my next video, so feel free to check that out. On the other hand, though, you know, you're curious about what team should be going with Jazz Noya, then check out below my quick team video, which I've just made. Personally, I think it's probably one of my better videos in terms of like quality, but also information. So yeah, check it out. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.